Mr. President?
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum
We are
call?
not.
Mr. President, I rise today because the American people deserve affordable health care, and they deserve a government that works for them, not a government of threats, not a government of bullies. They deserve a government that comes together in a bipartisan way to find solutions to the problems and challenges they face. Sadly, right now, we are on day 18, where the Republicans in the House of Representatives have not reported to work. Day 18. I went over there this morning, and there are literally more statues of former Republican leaders than there are actual Republican House members in the entire House. I walked down the hallways. I went to the door. I went to see if anyone was there. There's no one there. There's just a bunch of statues of former leaders. We need real leaders right now over in the House that are willing to sit down and negotiate with members of the Senate and, yes, with the president. Not to be rubber stamps of the president, but to actually come back and say, this is what I'm hearing from my constituents, because we know what they're hearing. We have seen the numbers. And some of them have been willing to say it. Some of the House members on the Republican side, some of the senators. 3/4 of the people on the Affordable Care Act plans, according to a study from the Kaiser Family Foundation, 3/4 of them are in states won by President Trump. The vast majority of them are in red congressional districts. So we know what they're hearing because it's what I've been hearing. Some of the people are already getting notices in some states, like in Senator Warnock, Senator Ossoff's state of Georgia, that they're seeing a doubling of their premiums or a tripling of their premiums. And I have heard the proposed numbers in the state of Minnesota. It is not pretty. A few weeks ago, I went on a 13-county rural tour in my state. I visit all 87 counties every year. And I met with soybean farmers, and one of them told me that what he was seeing between the tariffs drying up his market, 60% of the soybeans in Minnesota are exported around the world. We're proud of that. We feed the world. Those markets have dried up. They can't sell their soybeans. They can't get a good price for their soybeans. Heard the same thing from our corn growers. So when you look at what's happening with their markets, and then you look at what's happening with their input costs for things like fertilizer because of the tariffs, of the Trump tariffs, and you look at the increases for them in their daily living expenses like electricity bills, like grocery bills, because these tariffs, and yes, these healthcare premiums. You look at this, and one soybean farmer told me this is a perfect storm of ugly. So what should our answer be? To stay away, like these Republican House members have done, because they're afraid of having a vote about the release of the Epstein files? That soybean farmer is like, what? Go take care of your business, but your job is to come here and help me. Families' budgets are being squeezed. The president promised he would bring down prices on day one, but instead it is day 261, and the opposite is happening, especially with health care. And this isn't a December problem or a January problem. This is a now problem, because November 1st is the date. November 1st is the date where these plans that are called different things in different states, in my state it's called MNsure, when these plans, which over 25% of our farmers are on, for one thing, and a whole bunch of small business owners, they're not working at some big corporation in a small business. They do not have the option of getting their plans that way. Instead, they rely on these types of plans from the state. Ours existed even before the Affordable Care Act, but is one of those Affordable Care Act plans. And so November 1st is when that marketplace opens up. And then they got to decide. They can't afford doubling the premiums. And that's what this fight is about. A poll published last week found that 78% of Americans think we should extend the ACA tax credits, including significant majorities of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. Why don't my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and my colleagues that aren't here over in the House, Republicans, why don't they see this as an opportunity to do something good, to come to the table and do something good? That's what this is about to me. I thought that's what we were elected to do. But instead, what do we see? According to Minnesota's health insurance marketplace, a 30-year-old in Mower County, that's one of our rural counties kind of near the Iowa border, earning $39,000 per year would see their premium increase from $77 per month this year to $225 a month for the same plan. Not extra bells and whistles, the same plan. A family of 3 in Roseau County, that's way up north, with an annual income of $106,000, this is a family of 3, would see their premium jump from $675 a month to $1,100 a month, an annual increase of more than $5,000. A 60-year-old married couple in Bemidji, earning $85,000 per year. This is the middle of our state, beautiful lakes area, home of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox, just dealt with a horrible, horrible storm, and their town showed this incredible resiliency. A 60-year-old married couple in Bemidji earning $85,000 per year will see their premium $1,700 per month. That means an additional $15,000 next year for the same coverage. These increases are going to force people to make a decision. As my rural hospitals told me, behind closed doors, some of it, they said, so we've got a whole bunch of people that are going to be hurt by these Medicaid cuts that were in the bill, the budget bill this summer. And we've got a whole bunch of problems because $500 billion in Medicare cuts was automatically triggered by that big, beautiful bill, as it's called, or big, beautiful betrayal of a bill. $500 billion in Medicare cuts was triggered. Why? Because the debt went up so high because of all the tax cuts for the wealthiest. And that's just in law. If you put up the debt that much, you're going to get Medicare cuts that aren't going to hit individuals. They will eventually, but they're going to hit these hospitals. I say eventually because there's not going to be any place to go to get your health care if you're in a rural area and these hospitals and clinics start closing down. So on top of all that, Medicaid, the Medicare, then you layer on these Affordable Care Act issues. And what the people, the doctors, the nurses told me was that because that's how so many of their patients get their health care, if they don't get their insurance, which some of them just won't be able to afford unless we do something about it, which is fully within our power to do. Like literally, you could take that money that was going to go to Argentina and screw over our soybean farmers in Minnesota, that $20 billion, I have no idea why that was a good idea. You can take that money and that's going to pay for a big chunk of just the first year of these tax credits for regular Americans, and not screw over our soybean farmers. So anyway, they told me that if you make sure these people still have insurance, that's a huge deal to these rural hospitals. It means that they can maybe just barely eke by and make it, because otherwise people are going to get rid of their insurance, then they're going to show up in the emergency rooms because they're not going to be getting not just primary care, but elective surgeries, regular things they should be getting because they don't have the insurance, and they're going to show up in the emergency rooms, and then the hospitals are going to be paying for that care. That's what we're dealing with here. And these increases are going to force people across the country to make these impossible decisions. Constituent was caught off guard of mine by a $2,000 premium increase. A family of 4 considering downgrading their insurance plan. And a father who expects that his family will owe $16,000 more next year. One woman currently saves more than $450 per month because of the ACA tax credit. She's retired, she's single, so she does not have any additional income coming in. And that gives her the $5,400 extra per year. And that is before you factor in, and this is important for people to know, because everyone's having trouble with what's going on in the insurance market right now. That's before you factor in what is expected to be a 21% increase in the premium. Another constituent who shared that her biggest fear is affording health care for her family. She said, please keep up the fight for the ACA subsidies. Every day the cost for just living goes up. I'm worried for my family. We know our healthcare system is far from perfect. There are many steps we should take to improve it. I could spend the whole day giving you some ideas that would be constructive. One of the things that I finally got passed into law that I spent years working on and leading the bill, a negotiation of prices under Medicare. Congress, before I got here, somehow locked itself in to what the prices should be under Medicare, and you could see people and our worthy veterans under the VA getting much better deals on their drugs than all of the seniors in America. Why? Because the VA was negotiating for prices and Medicare was banned from negotiating. So we opened that up for at least 10 drugs in the first year, drugs like Xarelto and Eliquis and Januvia and Jardiance, big drugs with big populations of people that use them. And we got that negotiation started during the last administration, and we're able to get some remarkable savings, but there should be many more savings. And these are supposed to be negotiated 15 more drugs and 15 more drugs and 15 more drugs. And I can tell you right now, I'm watching to make sure that happens. But there could be a lot more we could do on the front of pharmaceuticals and many other areas of healthcare. But instead, the least we can do right now is make sure that people are going to end up bankrupt when small farm bankruptcy is at a 5-year high right now, who live in rural areas. We're asking our colleagues to come to the table. We're asking the Republicans in the House of Representatives to return to work so that they aren't outnumbered by a bunch of statues that have been sitting there for 100 years in the rotunda. We'd like the real representatives to come back and join us in negotiating to end the shutdown, which is what we want, but also to do something to help Americans with their health care. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, this really is a turning point for our country, and a turning point in our fight to make health care more accessible for all Americans. For the first time in 6 years, the government is shut down. And certainly nobody wanted to get to this point, including me. But we're here for one reason, because the MAGA Republicans shut down the government because they refused to address the health care crisis that they've created. Earlier this summer, the administration passed what we call the Big Bad Betrayal Act, as we call it, at a time when Americans are begging for financial relief. They were stripped of health care, faced with the loss of health care for 15 million people. That's right. The MAGA Republicans have gutted more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years from Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, health care that literally millions of Americans rely on. And we're not just talking years in the future, it starts this month. At the end of this year, the Affordable Care Act's tax credits will expire unless Republicans act now to extend them. If they don't, and they are clearly divided on this issue, premiums across the country, on average, are going to double starting next year. As a little perspective, that means many Coloradans will pay over $1,000 more for health care in 2026 than they did in 2025. Now, insurance companies are just starting to notify Americans about these massive cost increases. And you talk about a kick in the gut. When I was governor, we expanded health care to 400,000 Coloradans with help from the ACA tax credits. We got to 96% coverage for Coloradans to have health care. MAGA Republicans want to undo that progress, and we shouldn't let that happen. It doesn't end there. The budget bill is the centerpiece of a much broader campaign to strip health care coverage away from millions and millions of Americans. The moment the president took office, MAGA Republicans essentially handed him and Secretary Kennedy a free pass to attempt to dismantle our public health care system and to destroy much of the science-backed public health policy. Now, what exactly did they do? Well, the president and RFK Jr. fired every single member of the CDC's independent panel on vaccines and replaced them with vaccine skeptics, people that really didn't believe too much in the value of vaccines. Then when the president's own CDC director voiced her opposition, they fired her too. Now that puppet panel completely changed the COVID vaccine recommendations for Americans. Now folks across the country are struggling to figure out whether they can get a vaccine at the pharmacy and what it's going to cost. The president's first administration oversaw Operation Warp Speed, which developed the first COVID vaccines in what was almost a miraculously rapid time frame. But now he's actively undermining that same science. It's astounding. Reproductive health care, they're gutting that too. Again, back when I was governor in Colorado, we made free and low-cost birth control accessible to every Coloradan. We reduced unwanted pregnancies by almost 60%. Now this administration is doing everything they can to eliminate the last remaining abortion protections. They're threatening access to mifepristone, a medication that's been proven safe and effective for nearly 30 years. On top of that, they've completely given up on things like fighting cancer, slashing hundreds of millions of dollars in cancer-related research grants. That's right, you heard me clearly, cancer. Now we can't even agree that cancer is worth beating. If that wasn't enough, the White House actually reached out, publicized, the president talked to pregnant women, told pregnant women not to trust their doctors, but that they could feel assured that taking Tylenol while you're pregnant would cause autism. They did this without any scientific proof. It's hard to believe that they were telling pregnant women that Tylenol was going to cause autism. It's, in many ways, one large diabolical fear tactic. And it puts the health of so many Americans at risk. And we can't let it continue, which really brings us to this showdown. We're asking for this administration to negotiate and to take basic action to restore health care to Americans. MAGA Republicans I think they should be thanking us for giving them an off-ramp to undo the horrendous cuts that are going to ruin people's lives, real lives. It will cost people their lives. So far, no one seems to be listening, but here's what's at stake if we don't hold our ground. I recently, a couple weeks ago, visited a nursing home in Lakewood, Colorado. Now, many Americans don't know this, but Medicaid covers the cost of roughly 60% of residents in nursing homes across the country. At the facility I visited in Lakewood, over 90% of the residents are there because of Medicaid. I sat in a circle surrounded by residents, some with disabilities, and their caregivers, all trying to understand what these cuts meant for their health, for their lives. One resident told me point blank that Medicaid saved his life. He said he would still be living on the streets without it because the cost of his epilepsy medication was far too high. His health care, his medication, the roof over his head is now under threat with these cuts coming to Medicaid. This is a very sobering truth. If you're a single adult in Colorado, you don't even qualify for Medicaid. You'll be making too much to qualify for Medicaid if you earn more than $1,735 a month. That is $10 an hour. If you make more than $10 an hour, you don't qualify for Medicaid. So you've got to be working, and you've got to make less than $10 an hour. Pretty easy to verify, and creating the red tape and bureaucracy to get at these mythical cases of abuse, it defies rational thought. The president's big ugly bill doesn't just put a $1 trillion hole in health care, but it creates mountains of paperwork and endless reams of red tape. It creates challenges for people with disabilities, and people making $10 an hour are going to have a real hard time navigating. And if they fill out a form incorrectly or they don't turn it in on time, they get something wrong, they'll get kicked right off of health care. It's immoral. It's inhumane. This is what Medicaid is for, to make sure Americans get the care they need to stay alive, to keep shelter over their heads when they need around-the-clock care. All of it's under threat. Take one look on social media and you'll see why the White House and MAGA are trying to make this into one big joke. It's a carnival of jokes. But they can't avoid the suffering and the fear that their actions are causing. Americans elected a president because he promised to fight for the people who slipped through the cracks. But he's turning the very ground they stand on into quicksand. MAGA Republicans have passed a bill to take health care from 15 million Americans. Americans with cancer, sick kids, people living in nursing homes. With the money they saved, they gave trillion-dollar tax breaks, in many cases, to the wealthiest of Americans and to the largest of corporations. Now, hundreds of rural hospitals and clinics are at risk of closure. Millions of Americans are going to be uninsured. Many of them have pre-existing conditions, which will make them getting insurance again nearly impossible. And they're going to be faced with health care premiums that will be doubling. And that's for literally millions of Coloradans, or millions of Americans. And we're not talking decades in the future. We're talking about next month when these premiums go up. By November 1st, Coloradans on the marketplace plans that they get from the healthcare exchange, they'll be getting the terrifying news, the alert, from the insurance company that their premiums are about to increase. What we're being told is that some Colorado families are going to see price tags $1,000 a month higher than what their normal payments were. Democrats are fighting for one thing: to protect the essential care that millions of Americans rely on every single day. It's about making sure that moms and dads, little kids, grandparents, newborn babies don't fall through the trillion-dollar hole that MAGA has created in our healthcare system. Let's work together, let's reopen the government and protect the healthcare for the people of this country. We'll be waiting and ready at the negotiating table. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back the floor.
President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I think there is a tendency in this place, but probably in the country writ large, to compartmentalize each news cycle, to get outraged by every new contest to free speech or to the rule of law or to the power of Congress, but to really never see the full picture. Yesterday's assault on a particular democratic norm is forgotten, and we just wake up the next day to some new outrage. And I know that when people like me start talking about creeping authoritarianism in America, a lot of my Republican colleagues tune out. They think it's hyperbole or just politics. But I think it's time for all of us, Republicans and Democrats, to really step back and come to terms with the full picture of what is happening right now in America. I know that there are many Republicans in this chamber who are not ready to give up on democracy. But there are a group of radicals surrounding the president who have convinced him to operationalize a plan that is designed to try to crush political opposition and dissent in this country. When democracies die, sometimes it's in a coup, sometimes it's through violence, sometimes it's the occupation of the Parliament building, sometimes it's the cancellation of elections. But normally, that's not how democracies wither and vanish. In countries that have lost healthy democracy, normally what happens is that over time, the regime, the party in power, just contracts the space for dissent, for speech, for political opposition, such that while elections still happen, the opposition party can never win. The rules get rigged, essentially, so that the party in power never, ever loses. That is the plan. That is what President Trump and the radicals around that many of my colleagues aren't on board for this plan, but I worry that many of my colleagues refuse to see it in its totality because they deal with one outrage at a time. They justify one assault at a time without seeing the full scope of it. We aren't on the verge of an authoritarian takeover. We are in the middle of it. Now, it's not a fait accompli. It is not certain to be successful. But if we aren't clear-eyed about what is happening, then we have no chance to arrest it. If my Republican colleagues don't force themselves to pull back and see the totality of what is happening to the political opposition, it's hard to see because it's not happening to you. It's happening to your colleagues. You're not in jeopardy of being arrested. My colleagues are. Your allies are not being taken down off the air. Ours are. If we don't all pull back and see this for what it is, we will wake up and there will be a day where our democracy is gone. And so I want to talk to my colleagues today about the totality of this plan. And it really happens in 5 steps. The first step is to convert the justice system into a political witch hunt operation. Every totalitarian relies on the justice system to punish dissent, but also to immunize illegality for loyalists. That's the deal you get in a totalitarian state. If you speak out against the government, well, then the legal system comes crashing down on you. But if you are loyal to the government, then you can get away with crimes. We are seeing this at scale right now. The indictment of James Comey for no crime. Not a single prosecutor in that office in Virginia would sign the indictment. Not a single one until President Trump sent his personal lawyer to take over that office because only she would sign the indictment. We see this in the arrests that are being readied for at least one Democratic senator, for the Soros family, for the Attorney General of New York, for behavior that is not criminal, for behavior that apparently, reportedly, has been engaged in by plenty of other people. But you also see it in the way that it ultimately plays out in a very quiet way. The goal here is not to arrest everybody that opposes Donald Trump. The idea here is to just put enough fear into the ranks of those who might speak truth to power that they stay quiet. And it's undoubtedly happening. There are undoubtedly people in this country who see what is being threatened to Senator Schiff, what has happened to James Comey, and they have just decided to remain silent. This is a tried and true tactic of a totalitarian state, is that they threaten people with arrest if they speak up, and lots of people just decide not to speak up in the first place. But what also happens is that if you are loyal to the regime, you get away with crimes. See what happened to the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. He allegedly had committed a crime. He had committed significant corruption, but was exonerated by President Trump only after the mayor pledged his political loyalty to the president. In fact, one of the president's representatives and the mayor went on television to essentially publicly do the handshake. Loyalty from the mayor to the president, and exoneration of corruption from the government to the mayor. This is how totalitarian regimes control speech. They punish through the legal system dissent. They immunize corruption amongst those who are loyal. The second part of the plan is to eliminate free press and replace it with state-run media. Now, I don't know that I'd go so far to say that we have state-run media in the United States yet, but there is an attempt underway to try to use the vast regulatory powers of the administration to censor media. And again, the administration isn't hiding it. They are going on TV and celebrating the fact that in the latest instance, they threatened to pull the licenses of TV stations that didn't take off the air one of the president's loudest critics. But we also see it through the consolidation of media into the hands of allies of the president. One family that has just taken control of a major media group that owns, amongst other properties, CBS, is looking to also take control of CNN and may have an ownership stake and a control stake in TikTok. That family has shown a willingness to censor content, pulling Stephen Colbert off the air, and to put in place essentially Trump-approved censors for their future news content. So you get to state-run media not necessarily through the state owning and operating media, but by the state using its regulatory powers, its control of licenses and mergers, to make clear to the billionaire class that they can own media, that they can make a lot of money off of media, but only if it propagates Trump's narrative and suppresses criticism. It's happening right now. We're watching it happen. The third step in the plan is to militarize law enforcement. The deployment of the military to Chicago and to Portland to Los Angeles is illegal. It is illegal. But it is designed to try to, once again, quell dissent and protest. This isn't about public safety. This is about political intimidation. And you're just naive if you think that folks aren't going to be a little bit less interested in showing up at a protest if they're worried about getting roughed up by law enforcement. You are naive to think that there isn't an impact on speech when the military is patrolling your streets. The signal that is being sent is that if you speak up in opposition to this president, you are going to be greeted by troop deployments and tear gas and military helicopters. The fourth step in this plan is seizing control of government spending and taxation. And here is where I fail to understand why there isn't bipartisan agreement, why we don't join hands. Our founding fathers saw what the British king did, using taxation and spending in order to compel loyalty to the crown, in order to punish the colonists when they rose up in defense of their rights. And so when they wrote the Constitution, they deliberately put the spending and taxation powers not in the hands of the executive, but in the hands of Congress, where every faction is represented. Thus, this body is in a position to broadly protect the rights of all people. Trump is seizing spending power from us, canceling grants unilaterally, most recently, brazenly deciding to refuse to spend money only in the states represented by Democrats. The day after the shutdown began, they announced that they were first suspending billions of dollars worth of projects in just one city, New York City, not coincidentally represented by the Democratic leader in the House and the Senate. And then hours after, they released a list of canceled energy projects. They listed the states that they were being canceled, and every single one of those states was represented by 2 Democratic senators. Everybody knew what was happening. It was an effort to use the spending power seized by the executive to punish representatives of the people who oppose the president politically. And then the fifth part of the plan is to rig the rules when the rules don't work for you. This is happening in the way that President Trump is going state by state and demanding that congressional lines be redrawn in the middle of a 10-year cycle in which traditionally we leave lines as they are. Why? He's, again, been totally honest and transparent about it. He just wants more Republicans elected. Even if the majority of people in a particular state favor Democrats, he wants the lines drawn in a way that would elect more Republicans to Congress. Now, in this case, it's of course forced Democratic states to do the same, but it was Donald Trump that started this cycle of changing the rules in order to make sure that his party stays in power, that he stays in power no matter how unpopular he gets. You see the same thing happening with respect to the control of information. Totalitarian states, they can't accept truth. They can't accept truth, so they try to destroy truth. Well, that's what Donald Trump is doing by banning reporters from the White House that don't toe the Trump or MAGA line. That's what they're doing in saying to reporters at the Department of Defense, you can't report on military operations unless you are given pre-approval. That's what happened to the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. When the labor statistics showed that the economy wasn't good, that guy got fired and replaced by somebody who would issue fake numbers that made the economy look better. You convert the justice system so that it pursues your political enemies and exonerates your political loyalists for crimes. You eliminate the free press and you replace it with a state-run or state-influenced media. You militarize law enforcement. You seize control of government spending and taxation. You rig the rules of democracy in your favor. You can't see the indictment of Comey, the cancellation of Kimmel, the troops in Chicago as different events. They are all part of the same story. They are all part of a plan, a well thought out plan. to try to destroy American democracy and create a new set of rules that will allow Trump and his allies to rule forever. I know this sounds extreme. It is. But if you connect the dots, if you allow yourself to see the whole story, the totality of this story, you will see the grave danger that we are in. I know that it's often easiest for all of us, but probably especially for supporters of the president who still support democracy, to just assume the best instead of assuming the worst, or to just kind of close the door and batten down the hatches until the storm leaves town. But think about how we will feel if this 250-year democratic experiment disappears on our watch, and we didn't do all we could as a body and as a citizenry, simply because we didn't want to face the hard reality. The authoritarian takeover isn't coming. It's here. We're in the middle of it. But it is not too late for everybody to see it and for us to stop it. I yield the floor.